Let's bow our heads in prayer. Lord God, our Heavenly Father, as you bring us together this afternoon in your divine providence, help us with the grace that you give us freely to discern what it is you require of us. Grant us your wisdom in abundance, that any decisions that we're asked to make are always made in conformity with your will and for the aim of improving the common good. And we ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Thank you very much indeed, Val. That's very kind of you, especially at such short notice. First of all, I'd like to record my pleasure and your pleasure too, I'm sure, in the appointment of Mr. William MacDonald as Director of Education. His appointment comes into effect sometime in early January, I believe, but congratulations to you, Willie, from all of us.
Thank you.
And now, although he won't thank me for it, this is possibly the last time I shall be in the company of the Director of Education, and I feel that I need to say a few words about him. Bernard Chisholm joined the Corps on a permanent basis in November 2002. Prior to that, he had held roles in social work, that's what it says, which doesn't tell anything like the story. On the 1st of April 2015, he was appointed Director of Education, and on the 16th of October 2018 to the post of Director of Education, Skills and Children's Services, which is a significant cross-Corps responsibility. He held posts at all levels in education and in a variety of disciplines, so that when he was appointed Director, he came to that task well prepared for the responsibilities which lay ahead. I joined Bernard on the 16th of May 2017. We had responsibility for the education of all our disparate islands children, half the budget of the Corps and half of the cuts. Yet almost all of our many conversations centred on innovation in education. That suited me just fine, since I have always been keen to support new ways of educating young people. In a recent conversation with Corps education officers, Her Majesty's Inspectorate offered the opinion that Bernard was, quote, one of the most innovative and inspirational directors of education in Scotland. I too saw how at meetings of the Northern Alliance, his contemporaries deferred to him at all times. He was highly respected, and rightly so. His watchword was innovation, and look where it led him. He found a way to resolve staffing and subject availability issues by creating eSchool. He reinvigorated Bord na Gaelic and the national offer and support, so that now the default entry class for primary pupils locally is Gaelic medium. He developed a charter approach to skills development Scotland, and our leaver destinations are the highest in Scotland. He encouraged the modern apprenticeship pathway through developing the young workforce, which means that not all of our pupils need to follow the outdated Highers route to further and higher education. He introduced the concept of executive heads, which a SNAP Scottish Government inspection praised as being an excellent solution to the issues facing the department. He was instrumental in creating the solution to the Castlebay complex, which will be another first for the Scottish Government. He even created a situation where part of his salary was paid for by external sources. His relationship with his staff was first class. This was exemplified by his recent virtual leaving party, where so many staff linked in to say happy retirement. He challenged staff, and they blossomed under his leadership. He went the extra mile, they went the extra mile for him. I saw that most clearly in the work done preparing schools for blended learning in response to the coronavirus. In less than 2 weeks from a standing start, department staff, executive heads and school staff created a plan which included a different arrangement for every school. Long hours were worked and the one intervening weekend was lost to those involved. The plan was the envy of the Northern Alliance and was commended by the Scottish Government. It led to over 93% of our pupils being involved in education despite COVID-19. I really enjoyed the annual visits to schools. I learned a great deal. Mostly, I had confirmed my admiration for teaching and support staff throughout our islands who do a wonderful job. Bernard knew them all. On our way to each school, he described the school, told me who worked there, and indicated the areas of concern that would be raised, and he was right every time. He sought to reassure and resolve any issues. We were always warmly welcomed. Bernard has always taken a particular interest in children's services. It is an area of work that is very varied and requires daily adjustment to the issues presented by individual children in difficult circumstances. He always wanted to know how we were doing in looking after our charges, and he again encouraged innovation in finding solutions which were suitable to the individual child. He was not averse to finding innovative solutions to resolve problems. Bernard and I worked well together. I enjoyed our interaction, his honesty and his zeal. He supported me when I was in real need of support. I very much appreciated that. I am going to miss him. We will all miss him. I wish Bernard a very long and happy retirement. And finally, I have borrowed a video from which was prepared by the staff or their director, and I'm going to tell you who is going to appear in the video so that you will recognize most of them, but perhaps not all of them. First of all, to speak will be the Deputy First Minister, John Swinney, who is also the Minister for Education. He is a long-term supporter of the work of eSchool, and he has recognised the pace, innovation and creativity of the delivery of education in the Western Isles under Bernard's tenure. Joan Mackay is the Head of Curriculum Innovation with Education Scotland. She is a native islander and a long-term supporter of the work of the Corps. She has been heavily involved in working with us on DYW, eSchool, development of the National Curriculum Offer and curriculum innovation. Bruce Robertson, OBE, former Director of Education at Highland Council and Aberdeenshire Council. Bruce has also worked previously as advisor to the Scottish Government, to ADES and to other national agencies. He was also an interim Chief Executive at Bord na Gaillimh. He is a frequent collaborator with the CNES and is the author of the 2020 Vision Report. And finally, Hugh Fraser, former Director of Education, Culture and Sport at Highland Council and the successor in the role to Bruce Robertson. Hugh has been an advisor to Corn Nial and Shear on a number of occasions and has participated in the authority's self-evaluation work. He has a strong understanding of the strengths and the progress of the Corps in the last 5 years. And I'll now ask Donald MacLeod if he would let us see the video.
Bernard, I was very disappointed to hear that you've decided to retire, and I wanted to extend to you my warmest thanks for all that you've contributed to the world of education, and also to extend my warmest wishes to you for a long and a happy retirement. You've made a massive contribution to education in Scotland, and particularly in your beloved Western Isles, and there are some real highlights to your term in office. The launch and the development of eSchool has been a personal mission of yours, which has been accomplished with tremendous success and energy. Your leadership of the GLAB has brought such an important commemoration to the Islair tragedy for people in the Western Isles, but has also engaged young people in the telling of a story and of appreciating the ability to express the wonders of their talent in the Gaelic language. For all of that and much, much more, I extend my warmest thanks to you. I wish you well, and on a very personal level, you have always welcomed me with tremendous generosity when I have visited the Western Isles, and for that I shall be forever grateful. All good wishes to you, Bernard.
Bernard, I wish you all the best in the next stage of your journey. It's been a real joy and privilege to travel part of that journey with you, to learn from you and to learn with you. Your passion for people, especially for young people, what makes them tick, what makes them do their best, has been a defining feature of who you are. Your contribution to education in the Western Isles and in Scotland is significant. We're going to miss all of that. So enjoy the next bit. Take care. Be sensible, of course. The motorbike, yes, maybe. The boat, yes. Polytunnel sounds like the safest and best option right now. Enjoy it all and thank you for it all. All the best.
Well, hi Bernard. It's Bruce here. That day's come around, time and tide, from no man. I just wanted to say how great a pleasure and a privilege it's been to work with you. You've had some gig over the last few years in the Western Isles, a very successful gig. You put the Western Isles on the map as far as Scottish education is concerned, and that's no mean feat at all. You put it on the map for the right reasons. Words to describe Bernard Chisholm. Hugely enthusiastic, hugely committed to young people. Great foresight, great vision, great leadership, but actually an ability to apply all of these attributes for the good of the young people and the wider communities in the Western Isles. And at times like this, directors of education think about legacy, what I left behind. You've left a huge legacy behind. People will obviously know what's happened with ESCOL, and boy, that's been a fantastic achievement. You and the team, groundbreaking achievement that's pulled in, literally, global interest. But what you've done also in the curriculum in the Western Isles, the Transformational Change Programme, particularly in the applied vocational learning, where young people have an opportunity now, an option to stay and work and be educated in their own villages and their own towns and their own islands, no longer having to leave to get education and to get work. But for me, the biggest legacy of the lot is what's happened to Gaelic, the Gaelic language and culture under your leadership. The decision about a year ago now that the council took to make Gaelic immediate education the default position, I think will have decades and decades of significance and legacy, and for that, well done to you. So big shoes to fill. I wouldn't want to follow you, and please remember, we've still to go up the Clyde in your boat from BC Studios. All the very best, and thanks for what you've done for Scottish education.
Hello Bernard, I'm delighted to have this opportunity to tell you just how much I've enjoyed working with you and seeing what you have managed to achieve through your amazing commitment, your imagination, your creativity, your drive and your enthusiasm. You really are one of the greats of Scottish education, and you've made a tremendous contribution to the lives of children, young people and families, and a huge contribution to the well-being of the people of the Western Isles. Have a very, very long, happy and exciting retirement. You richly deserve it. It's been great working with you. All the very best. Thank you.
Thank you to these four speakers. I know the Director of Education is not going to thank me for any of that, but it was important that we mark this occasion because I certainly am really going to miss my involvement with Bernard. Now we will move to the mundane, the conduct of the meeting, and I remind you of the following points. Please ensure that your camera and microphone are off. This assists with the broadband connectivity and also prevents background noise. I will call on the relevant officer to present their report. If a member or officer wishes to ask a question or raise a point, please do so by using the raise your hand function on your device. And I will remember that Mr. Ray Mackenzie doesn't have such a device. I will invite each member in the queue to speak, and at that point, please switch your microphone and camera on. After you have spoken, please ensure that you lower your hand and put your microphone and camera off. Your device should be positioned so that your image is clear to the other participants, and please speak clearly and concisely directly at the camera. When calling for agreement of the recommendations at each item, and no show of raised hands will be taken as an indication of the committee's approval. In regard to declarations of interest, members are reminded of the protocol. You must leave the meeting by ending the call, which will be confirmed by the moderator to the chair. And following consideration of the item, you will be invited back into the meeting by the moderator. Please ensure that you are available to accept the invite to rejoin. Item number 5 will be taken in private at the end of the meeting. Prior to moving into private, participants other than the relevant officer and members of the committee will be asked to leave the virtual meeting. There will be a short recess to allow for this process and to resume with the private items. Finally, a reminder that the meeting is not being live streamed. However, be aware that it is being recorded, and the recording will be made available on the CALS website following this meeting. We now move to item number 1, which is the minute of the meeting of the 22nd of September 2020, which is there for your approval. Do you agree to approve the minute? Right, no hands, thank you very much indeed. Secondly, I just remind you under item 2 about declaration of interest. Item number 3 under performance management. It's a report by the Director of Education and Children's Skills and Children's Services. The report presents an overview of the Education, Skills and Children's Services Department business plan, progress and related performance for the second quarter. And Director, were you planning on speaking to? The Director will speak to the report.
Thank you very much, Chair. The report as outlined indicates that for the department we have 21 actions in our business plan, 3 requiring monitoring and all others on track. Risks, we have a number again which are being effectively monitored, and the financial position of the department as outlined we anticipate coming within budget and believe we are able to budget for the next 2 years effectively, although with pressures. The report highlights in section 5.1 the main issues around children's services, from 5.4 under education and 5.7 schools and community. The key challenges going forward, as you would anticipate and have been over the last year, are the budgetary pressures. Representing a significant budget of the CORLA, we are constantly having to work in education to make the budget balance. So that will remain and increase as many of the targets for efficiencies have been fully realized. So it's becoming more difficult. I would also draw to members' attention that under budgetary pressures, the average income additional to core budget that the department's received over the last 3 years has been 5 million. That ends up becoming a significant risk in itself, in that the department has to continue to achieve those type of incomes. Workforce planning is our second major area. The members will know that over the last 5 to 6 years through the LNC, on our teacher side, we've had a workforce reduction strategy in place. That has proved highly effective. The next round of that takes place this coming month, and our head teachers now, particularly in secondary education, are doing their annual work in that regard. And we will, as in the previous years, but probably for one of our last years, introduce our voluntary early retirement scheme. But members should also know that workforce. So critically, the department has reduced its central management to now it is at the lowest that it's ever been. And I hope most members would recognise that the performance of the department has matched any previous year and continues to show trends in most areas of progress. However, there is little opportunity for us to downsize the centre any further. eSchool, currently, as the Deputy First Minister has indicated, has become the insurance policy for Scotland in COVID. Particularly in this vulnerable time. Currently on study support for young people, we have over 7,000 young people registered, and we'd have to recognise the commitment and the many long hours that our staff are doing to keep pace with that development. However, given now that it has been adopted as the national resource, along with services of pre-recording led by the West of Scotland Partnership and support resources, and a provider service, it is truly now a national resource, and we are in the final stages of agreeing grant funding for the next couple of years ahead of transferring to core national funding. COVID-19 clearly has been a huge challenge, but one in which I would like to think that everybody has worked hard at within the schools, and we have given a good service with high levels of attendance and, I think, more importantly, attainment. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Director. Members, do you have any questions for the Director? There are no hands. Right, thank you very much. You agree with the recommendation at 3-1? Thank you. We move now then to item number 4, which is the business plans being considered by all committees. It's been considered as a matter of some urgency to enable the committee to consider the business plans. The report recommends proposals that aim to realise savings of 3.5 million across 2021-23. Whilst these have been designed to minimise the impact on services, the scale of savings means that there will be changes to how services will be delivered, including some reductions. Details of relevant integrated impact assessments are provided in relation to each of the proposals in Appendix A. The Corn has carried out extensive consultation on its proposals, including an online survey and community conversations. These have attracted valuable feedback, which is provided at Appendices B and C. The Chief Executive, the Director for Assets, Finance and Resources, and the Director for Education, Skills and Children's Services will speak to the report and answer any questions. I think we'll start with the Director of Assets, Finance and Resources, Mr. Emmett.
Thank you, Chair. I won't repeat everything that I went through this morning, but I think it's important to say this is part of a process we've been going through over the last few months, recognising the significant financial challenge that we are facing. The appendix, I suppose, as far as this committee's interest is concerned, this is an opportunity to look in detail at the proposals, to ask questions of the Director and myself in relation to what they mean, and hopefully to agree the proposals that will continue to be implemented. We're mindful that many of these proposals require time and effort to take forward, and given the scale of the financial challenge that we're facing, something like 4.2 million we expect to have to find next year, it's important that that work gets underway now. You'll see in Appendix A we have added a column in to highlight which committee each proposal relates to make it easy for members to identify the relevant ones for this committee. And details are provided in the backing papers to it of where integrated impact assessments have been carried out. We are arranging to have those circulated to members, but that hasn't been done yet. We're just working on that at the moment. So I think that's all I want to say just now, Chair. It's obviously important that we make progress where we are able to make progress. Appendix D includes the items where the proposals have been deferred for the time being, but there's still £1 million or so gap in our proposals, even if we implement all of these successfully. So there is more work to do on them going forward, Chair. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Emmett? Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you, Chair. Would like one or two bits of clarification. First of all, Mr. Emmett, in regards to BP4, which is under to vacate the St. Leonard's area, and it indicates in the report that there's not a requirement for the impact assessment. I don't understand that response to the report, especially when you look at the aspect of the pointer centre there and where the part-time coordinators are going to be, the pointers coordinators going to be, 3 or 4 staff. Then you've got the aspect of the young mums group, the young carers group, the drop-in facility, support for youth volunteering, centre use, various youth meetings, etc., etc. So there has to be an impact assessment in regards to pointers and where it's going because of the work that's ongoing. And I was surprised it wasn't in Appendix D. I thought we had indicated that we were going to defer the St. Leonard and pointers situation until we got further clarification. So I cannot go with what's before us in BP4 not having an impact assessment in relation to St. Leonard Centre, Director.
Chair.
Yes, Mr. Emmett.
If I may, the department, and Mr. Chisholm may wish to come in, the department's carried out an impact assessment and determined that a full impact assessment is not required. My understanding of that is it's because it's not proposed to discontinue the services, but to relocate them to somewhere which doesn't require the use of that asset, and therefore we're not removing any services from the public, which will have an impact on anyone, though they will be provided in a different place. Mr. Chisholm may wish to comment further on that, Chair. Just in relation to it's for this committee to decide if it doesn't want to carry forward any of the proposals. I know we did have a discussion through the seminar as to which ones we did or didn't think wanted to be taken forward. I hadn't picked this up as one where members didn't want to take it forward, but more that one where members were valuing the services provided from that location and wanted to make sure there was no disruption to the services. Though at the moment, presumably there is some disruption to the services because of the impact of COVID. Chair, the purpose for this committee today is to allow you to deliberate on whether these are ones you want to take forward or not. So that's a matter for the committee, Chair.
Director.
Yes, just to reaffirm what Mr. Emmett is saying, from our point of view, what we are looking to do is maintain services and do so from other locations, which we are in the process of discussing at the moment. And when we're able to conclude on these, we would come back to committee. I think that is consistent with the direction of travel of our policy, which is downsizing on our buildings and working with partners for the delivery of services. So there is no suggestion that these services would be terminated or lost. Therefore, no requirement for an impact. Is purely finding locations that we can operate it from.
Councillor Nicholson, are you happy with this response?
Thank you very much, Chair. If I were to ask the question of the Director, where are they going? There needs to be a central point in Stornoway for young people and these, and for this to be cut as a proposed here instead of deferred until we're very clear where these counselling and these DOE and these drop-in centre and young mums and learning needs and the different groups that use the place, from Action for Children to street pastors, etc. I am really concerned, Chair, that it isn't clarified and cleared where we're going. So we're going to cut this. So I'm not happy that it goes forward as a cut. I would be happy for a deferred proposal till we find out the actual facts of the situation.
So if I can respond, Chair, first of all, to say that this is not a cut. There is no intention of a cut in service. What we are doing as a department at the moment is working with other partners, including third sector churches and others, to identify resources that we can operate from in partnership. No suggestion of a cut. I think the Director of Finance and Asset has indicated that in terms of us achieving our budget, we need to be in a position relatively early to move forward on this. So we are in those conversations at the moment. Colleagues are working with others, and when we are in a position to finalise on these, we would come back, and that is the position we are in. And there's no intention of a cut. There is an intention to find better use of resources that we have or our partners may have.
Thank you for that, Direct. Thank you for that, Direct, and response to that. My information is that our officers were not even involved in the decision that is before us today, and we're quite shocked at it. And as a centre, you talk about working with other groups, etc. They do that anyway. The worry is not having anything in the town centre that'll pick these up. I also spoke to people in the Bridge Community Centre that didn't know anything about possible partnership or anything. And I spoke to another group as well. So my concern is it hasn't been investigated properly where these services were to go, and that the Pointer Centre should be left open for these services until we're very, very clear where the centre is and where these services and these workers in youth work, we're talking about our young people here, where they're to be based and what they're to be involved with. So I'll leave it at that, Chair. But yeah, I cannot go with it in this form, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nicholson. I think what you described is what is happening. And we will certainly come back to you once we have the appropriate information for you. Rest assured. Councillor Ray Mackenzie.
Can I pick up on one more thing, Chair? Because there were two items since on what's before us. I just want to get a point of clarification in regards to BP 16, which is the harmonised timetable in secondary schools. If, as a committee, Chair, we pass this today and accept what's been proposed by the Education and Children's Services Committee, does that put in jeopardy the special meeting in regards to executive heads signed by 17 members of this council? I do not want to be in a decision where we pass this and then find out afterwards that it supersedes having any further special meeting to discuss the executive heads.
Yeah.
Robert, can you answer that question?
Chair, yes. The proposal in relation to introducing a harmonised timetable, and the director will be better placed to talk about the technical details of it than me, is not predicated on executive heads. Clearly, executive heads would make the process easier, as I understand it, but the concept of a harmonised timetable is not. I'm trying to think what the word is not dependent. I was in some correspondence with colleagues about the special meeting that has been requested, but as far as I see it, a harmonised timetable can be introduced even if you don't have executive heads, though clearly having some oversight of that programme across and in fact much work has already been done on this by Bernard and his team. Having a harmonised timetable across the school doesn't preclude that decision. You'll see that given the debate that we've had to date in relation to executive heads, the remaining savings in relation to that have been included in D as being deferred. So they're exclusive options, though clearly you can't. There is an interaction between the proposals. Mr. Chisholm may be able to talk more to the technical aspects of it.
So, Chair, with permission, first of all, the harmonised timetable has been something that the 4 secondary head teachers have been working with the head teacher of eSchool and the head of service, Mr. MacDonald, for the last 3 years. It is in implementation already. The information here is about how we extend that across not just our own work here, but in partnership with the Northern Alliance. So the harmonised timetable is a piece of work that will go ahead whether or not we proceed with executive headships. The Director of Finance is correct.
Okay, Councillor Ray Mackenzie.
Thank you, Chair. It's more or less a couple of questions on these. BP7, selling the old house. I assume there'll be a capital receipt for that because I notice it's only 4,000 in the first year. But my question on that one is, it says something about transfer to Keith Street. Can you explain whereabout in Keith Street are they going?
Okay, so I'm sorry I don't have an address, but the council has a property there, although we are currently using other properties in the department. We have worked with HHP on rental. However, the position for us on the old house in BP7, the critical part for that is any receipt of that we were reliant on for the capital necessary for the construction of revised or new residential provision for severe and complex, as both match funding with Action for Children for any capital income they would invest. And this is something we have been trying to work on for the last couple of years. So the situation at the moment is we have no clients in the old house. We have not used it for a year period, given the condition it's in. It doesn't meet registration purposes. There is property the council has in Keith Street. I'm sorry, I'll circulate later the address of it. And in terms of other properties for Housing First, we have approximately, I think at the moment it's approximately 10 properties with HHP where we support clients with in our integrated partnership arrangements with Action for Children and the FOIA organisation.
Thank you. That's answers that one. Thank you. BP21, Close Sandwick Resource Centre. What's the thinking as far as the building's concerned there?
Yeah, as many of you will know, we run 2 services or have 2 services operate out of Sandwick. A service for severe and complex provision, which over recent years in the purposes of inclusion have reduced in number, and our extended learning resource, which is a 7-day-a-week, 365-day-a-year service that we run both for an alternative education program or for out-of-school support for vulnerable young people. Our situation is we had planned to build the resource centre in an agreement with SHARE, the local group who have the youth centre there. And as members will know, we undertook not only to share funding for the development of the sports centre there, but in our partnership currently, we have an agreement whereby we meet a lot of the utility costs and other costs. Unfortunately, we're not able to proceed with the adjacent development, and therefore, in looking going forward, we have capacity in our schools. Now, the principle the council's adopted is where we have capacity, we should use. So I am looking to use the spare capacity in back and other schools to be able to operate some of our services, be it ELR or others. And in terms of severe and complex, we have enhanced provision at Skolnalock, and we have enhanced provision in the Nicholson, and we are looking to use those. We have reviewed that with parent interviews in terms of reviews of children. We have an ASN review going on at the moment, the outcome of which will be reported to the next committee. The Sandwick building itself, is not in a great state of repair. The main school building is quite costly to run. We've done a lot of work trying to maintain it today. The adjacent huts to the building are in a poor state. We just put cladding on top of old wood to give it a period of extension. And I think now we have an opportunity moving forward in the next capital plan, if we have this relationship with Action for Children with funding, to do a better integrated resource that brings together our extended learning and our residential facility on a new site, hopefully integrated with developments in our schools. So that's the planning there and the thinking.
Mr. Mackenzie?
Yeah, thank you. Well, I'm not. It's really afterwards, after the transfer of the pupils that are there at the present time. It's the sort of long-term view on the building. You yourself, of course. Sorry.
So our long term would be that we would have no ongoing interest and it would fall to one of those disposal. The Share Group have a rental agreement with us for the sports barn, and the subsidised funding that we currently give would then revert to the community to fund themselves. And we have no interest in the old schoolhouse either, which is in a very poor state of repair. So we would either look at demolishing and or sale of that asset along with other estate assets we try and vacate.
Yeah, well, the reason I brought it up is that I wonder if one of the possibilities in the future would be some form of school at Sandwick, but I realise that's not for just now. But and Chairman yourself will be interested in that. The final point I wanted to make was with regard to BP4, which I wasn't going to mention actually as one of my particular queries, but in view of the answers that have been given to Councillor Nicholson, I'm a bit concerned about this, and really I hope that more information will be coming forward and that action won't be taken before adequate provision is made for pointers and so forth. Thank you.
Again, Chair, if I can reassure Councillor Mackenzie, as I've done to Councillor Nicholson, there is nothing in any of our proposals that is suggesting a cut in service. It is talking about redesigning the services so they are delivered through either partnership or other accommodation we have. And once we've been able to conclude any work on that, we will come back. But there is no suggestion that the services are cut. That is purely vacating a building.
Councillor Roddy Mackay-Oost.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. My point is in relation to BP 16, as well the harmonised timetables in secondary schools. Can I just confirm if it says that harmonised timetables have been introduced? My understanding is that that's not actually the case at the moment, as the Nicholson is not harmonised with the other secondary schools. Can I confirm if the Nicholson is going to be harmonised with the other secondary schools in the islands, and how that will impact on the number of subjects that the young people will be able to access? Also, in relation to the executive headships, executive headships was never included in the plans. Even the Robertson report was specific that it should only be introduced in primary schools. Indeed, he goes on to say that the head teacher role is one of the most important, not just in the school, but in the community.
The executive heads, Councillor Mackay, has been deferred.
Yes, if you could just.
It's not on this list, and we're going to have a special meeting to discuss it. So
it's actually on BP 16. It is mentioned in BP 16.
Thanks. Okay.
I will read it out for you if you'd like me to.
All right, no. You're talking about the actual document. Okay, fine, that's okay.
The actual document, yes. It also states here that an integrated impact assessment has been completed and a full impact assessment is not required. I would say that is absolutely required if we are talking about introducing executive headships in our secondary schools, something that should never, in my opinion, happen.
Yep. Thank you very much, Councillor Mackay. Just to answer the three, and I'll also invite Willie McDonald to come in on this one after I've spoken, in respect to the fact that he has participated with the secondary head. The truth is, harmonised timetables do exist across the Western Isles, and it is by virtue of that, through e-learning, that we have been able both to improve the opportunity of choice for young people and the equity of provision and the better deployment of our staff. The fact that it doesn't yet reach a stage that we would wish, this BP 16 seeks to extend that. The Nicholson is part of our shared approach to timetabling, which is actually the definition of a harmonised timetable. It is trying to make sure that children and young people across the Western Isles can access the choices they require. Clearly, when we talk about a harmonised timetable being a unified timetable across 4 schools, that becomes challenging. So what we attempt to do is have a level at which we can harmonise based on the personalisation and choice that we undertake each year. To remind members of that, each year for young people in the senior phase and 3rd year, we do a personal and choice exercise, allowing them to indicate the choices they would wish to make across all curriculum options. We have in recent years expanded, and I'll come back to that later, perhaps under the items on the agenda to do with attainment. We have improved the opportunities for young people going into employment, and we have opened up the opportunities in applied learning. And we have used the harmonised timetable to give an opportunity for young people to have common choices there. In relation to the executive heads, then the comment on here is about the work we're doing to lead that programme of work, and as the chair has indicated, that will be further reviewed at the special seminar. However, the Nicholson and all other schools are intended to be working towards a harmonised timetable, but for those of you who know the complexity of the timetable, that can be challenging, but it has not prevented us implementing it. But I'll ask I'll ask the head of service, Willie McDonald, to make any further comment.
Just, excuse me, just in terms of the executive head, I acknowledge what the Robertson report said in 2018. I've spoken to Mr. Robertson this week, and he acknowledges that the landscape in Scottish education has moved on. We've got examples of executive heads appearing more and more. We have the 2,000 schools in Glasgow that were under one head for a while. I mentioned previously on Tyree and Oban, and Education Scotland produced a report in April 2020 saying that it was a strength, the executive head post. And I see a new campus opening in Ayrshire, Bethany campus, where 2 6-year schools have been amalgamated, and they are coming under one executive head as well, with about 3,000 pupils. Each school will continue to have a head of school, and they will have the autonomy to run the school as they previously have. The executive head will have an overview of how school is state and of the secondary development across the authority. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. MacDonald. Councillor John Mitchell.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, again, I do take your point, Chair, that there is a special meeting organised to discuss this, so I don't think this is the time or place. And I would challenge Willie McDonald, who was listening to you, but seemed still to go on about the merits or otherwise of executive heads in other areas, which don't bear any comparison to ours. But I will accede to the fact that that is for another day. Could I, with respect, also correct Mr. Chisholm that what has been asked for is not a seminar, but rather a full council meeting? And for members that perhaps aren't aware, because particular impact is felt in Harris, I tabled a request which had 9 signatories, which satisfies the constitutional protocol of Section 6 standing orders, a full council meeting to revisit
and re-debate the whole issue. So, I don't think this is quite right, Councillor McConnell. This is not the time or the place to discuss minutiae. But I just wanted to again address the same contradiction that was touched on by Councillor Mackay and Councillor Nicholson, that, if I quote in BP 16, it is necessary that executive headships are appointed as soon as possible. And yet I'm happy to see that it's in the list of deferred activities. There is a slight contradiction in there. And my final point is about integrated impact assessments. Very interesting when I heard from Mr. Emmett and also I think yourself, that you said that a full integrated impact assessment is not required if you're not removing anything. Well, with respect, you are removing a head teacher from a school, a 6-year presenting school in Tarbert, and you are removing something. So I really do think that the quote, an IIA has been completed, but a full one is not required, I would certainly challenge that. But just to let people know that the request was tabled on the 18th of November, and according to standing orders, there's 14 days in order to respond with a timing, and that timing expires tomorrow. And that, obviously, the full council meeting is when I think we will debate it in much more detail. Thank you.
Chair, if I can just clarify, standing orders would normally be held within 14 days. Obviously, it will depend on the subject matter request and gathering the necessary information for it. The financial information was available yesterday. I believe the director has done a report. I haven't seen the report yet. Once we receive all that, then we'll look to make arrangements for the special meeting. But the standing order says normally held within 14 days. We've been waiting to gather the information, which I said we now have. We will move forward to call the meeting. Sorry, Chair.
Right.
Roberts.
We'll just go on. No. Councillor Paul Steele.
Thank you, Chair. This is going back to Charlie's point at the start about the Pointer Centre. Just for information, myself and Nori met with Island Voices Youth Group, and we kind of raised a few of the budget lines or business plans that were being suggested. And in terms of the pointers, well, the closure of St Lennon's, I think pretty much what Charlie said, that they're keen for the service to remain kind of central and accessible to them. They weren't overly kind of bothered about the building being open or not, as long as there was something there to serve them. So I just thought I'd share that information.
Thank you very much, Councillor Steele. That's very helpful. Councillor Callum McLean.
Thanks, Chair, for coming in. I don't want to. I think all the steam has been already let out about BP4, BP16. I would like to ask the director about BP16. He mentions there that it is in implementation stage at the present time. But my how can I put it? I have heard that it is not an implementation in the Nicholson. Has it started in the Nicholson?
Director.
Okay. I will ask Willie to come in on this as well, but just to answer directly, the harmonised timetable is an attempt by the local authority to bring the 4 schools together to be able to offer subjects or provide for subjects to students in a school other than their own. Ideally, we would have liked to have had a common timetable, but clearly that provides challenges even to the 3 smaller schools. So currently, over the last 3 years, the Nicholson and the other 3 schools have worked together to make sure that they can support each other, meet the choices that young people make. I do not have the number of subjects at the moment or other, and maybe Mr. MacDonald can give an update on that. However, I would be happy to provide that information out with the meeting. But in simple terms for me at the moment, the 3 schools over the last year have worked to try to bring a more common timetable together. And we are working with the Nicholson to try and look at how they can integrate with that. But over the last 3 years, all 4 schools have been working to give that more harmonised offer to young people, including across applied learning in particular. I don't know if Mr. MacDonald would like to add anything further.
Just really, the harmonised timetable is taking longer. It's very complex. A school the size of the Nicholson compared to the smaller schools that only have one teacher maybe in subject, and just align it is a huge challenge. But with working with a timetable at the moment, and he's going to work for the 4 timetables in the 4 schools to see how we can align more. And this simply is just to provide more equity for the likes of Surrey, Scott, and for Castleby, so that they can just have the full range that they're offered in the Nicholson. So it's just to support young people more. Bernard's mentioned the foundation apprenticeships, for instance, where we have a cohort of maybe about 10 or 12 across the authority. Makes it viable if we work across the 4 schools. It wouldn't be viable to do it in 4 different sections in the 4 schools. There's things like higher psychology, higher RMPS, the specialists are in the Nicholson, for instance, but they've taught the curriculum for Scott. And these are just a couple of examples that show this, that all the schools can benefit from this harmonised approach.
Thanks, Chair. So, Mr. MacDonald, it is in start. It has started. Implementation has begun in the Nicholson. May I say I've got correspondence here from one of the teaching unions, and they say that the harmonised timetables were never agreed upon by LNCT, neither by the unions. Now, they were looking for, before they were...
Callum, Mr. McLean, Councillor McLean, I really don't think that's a matter for this particular discussion. That's a matter for the LNCT.
Yes, but what I'm saying is it certainly has a matter, because we're talking about harmonised timetables in secondary schools. And I'm saying to you is they have not been agreed between teaching unions, between staff who are actually operating these timetables. Now, why has this not happened?
Ask the director to come in.
Can I clarify 2 things? First of all, in terms of an IIA in relation to curriculum choice is not required, other than if we were removing choice or another way limited for young people. I think Bruce Robertson, Professor Chapman and others in Scottish education would confirm that our approach to harmonised timetable, e-learning, and the joint approach that we've adopted through personalisation and choice, all of which has been before this council before, and policy, has opened opportunity and perhaps more importantly, equity for young children. To remind everyone, the LNC is a negotiating body for terms and condition. It is not a group for policy. In fact, it was my previous practice. My previous practice was to take policy matters that led to change before the LNC. And in fact, at the period that the LNC has existed in the last couple of years, I was asked not to do that by the teacher's side. So harmonised timetables do not affect the terms and conditions of teachers, because they never breach their 22.5 hours. They never breach their terms on other ways, in the same way that e-learning doesn't. And the National EIS has confirmed that an e-learning contract where a teacher is within their 22.5 hours is a legitimate contract. So to answer the question, harmonised timetable choices exist to give choice to young people. They do not breach any terms and condition and do not require approval of the LNC. And they have been approved as policy by this COLA and subject to external review by HMI and others who have looked at our timetable.
So Mr. Chisholm is saying that you don't need to consult with the unions, with the staff, about the implementation of a harmonised timetable.
That's correct. Yeah.
That's clear. That clears that. I'm sure the unions will have a different opinion, and the staff may have a different opinion.
No, the national union is quite accepting of that situation.
That's a comment that I'm not privy to. The other one is I'm not going to touch on the executive heads. Enough is going to be said, and there's a special meeting for that. The other one is the closure of Sandwich Resource Centre, and I think Councillor Mackenzie mentioned that. One of the things that's happening is that, and when I look through the documentation, is that some of these facilities are being moved to schools, primarily the Nicholson Institute. Nicholson Institute, I've pointed this out before, is an already full school. It has pupils in it that it really is at bursting point. To put in some of this resource centre, the facility, into the Nicholson would seem to me to be a downgrading of a facility rather than an upgrading.
Well, you're entitled to your opinion, Councillor McLean, but I don't see it that way.
And that's fair enough, Francis. We don't agree on everything, Mr. McCormack.
No, that's true.
Yeah. So,
Chair.
Yes.
Just to confirm,
Director.
Just to confirm, Councillor McLean, we wouldn't put pupils into any of our schools where we didn't have capacity. Now, clearly, there are various schools with capacity that we look at. And I'm not at this point indicating where everybody will be placed, but Back has capacity, as you will know. Sconlaloch has capacity, and many other schools. The Nicholson Institute has pupil numbers within its capacity. That doesn't mean to say that for the small increase in young people who may have severe and complex needs, there would need to be adjustments to the where children are taught, rooms, etc. And these we are looking at present. And we would be in breach of appropriate resourcing if we try to put pupils into inappropriate room sizes, accommodation. There are clear parameters to that, and anything we're looking at the moment will be tested against these. But at this moment in time, we're not in breach. We are considering making sure that any decision we make to the Nicholson, we may engage with independent external specialists in terms of space management of those with severe and complex needs, and that will be reported within the ASN design review paper that will come to the next meeting of the Corner.
Is that figure, that saving of £62,000 then, does that take into consideration the changes that you're going to make in the Nicholson?
Of course, yes. The situation for us is that our capital budget is a separate one to our revenue. So it doesn't mean that I've taken the capital off that, but it does mean that I can look at capital or secure capital or redesign in other ways that give an ongoing revenue saving in terms of building use. Same for St. Lennon's and others.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. Councillor Norman MacDonald.
Hi guys, sorry I've moved, I'm in the bright light here of point since the power's back on. Yeah, thanks Chair. I too have concerns about the future provision for our most vulnerable, particularly with the proposal to possibly close the Sandwich Learning Centre. And I think combined with where we've mentioned closures before with pointers, myself and Paul have spoken to the young islanders with regards to provision of services. To make sure that we do, and impact assessment is a phrase that gets bandied about again, but the needs of the particularly vulnerable pupils with the proposal to move them into the Nicholson Institute, I've highlighted with Bernard and William before, and I'm grateful that they've taken on board the concerns of the parents involved and have spoken to them directly. So can I urge that we continue to engage in dialogue with the parents, particularly of the most vulnerable pupils who will be affected by the possible changes, to ensure that we take them with us with regard to any changes to their environment. And again, I thank Bernard and William for their concern and their immediate response to the parent who contacted me. So I'm grateful for you taking the time to engage with them and to assure them of the future provision for their very vulnerable young adults. So just to ensure that we keep front and centre the people who are affected by the changes we make. Yes, we do need to look at our budgetary concerns, but these affect people, from full-time able-bodied people who will be affected by job losses and etc., to the most vulnerable who cannot speak for themselves. So I'm grateful that you engage with them and hear their voices too. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor MacDonald. We certainly will look after them. Now I have no more hands. So can we agree the recommendation at 3-1? Thank you very much indeed. Now, the next item, of course, is in private. So we'll move to item number 6, which is the Chief Social Work Officer's report. This is a report by the Head of Children's Services, and it details the Chief Social Work Officer's annual report, which is required to be submitted to the Scottish Government. And Mr. David Gibson is available to speak to the report. David?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. As you say, this is the annual report that we're required to provide for Scottish Government. I have to say it did feel like reporting on a bygone era, because this report is for the last financial year, therefore is from a time where we had no idea of what the COVID pandemic was going to look like at all. There's only one difference from the normal report, and that's section 14 in the report itself, which does allow early reflections on the experience of staff and service users during the period of COVID. I'm not going to go on at any length with the whole document. I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you, Mr. Gibson. Do members have any questions? Mr. Gibson? I see no hands. Are you happy to agree the recommendation at 2-1? Thank you very much. Move now then to item 7, which is respite care policy for children and adults. Again, this is a report by the Head of Children's Services, and it seeks permission to authorise the implementation of the respite and care policy for children and adults. And again, Mr. Gibson is available to speak to this report. Mr. Gibson.
Thank you, Chair. I should note that we're asking this committee to give permission for children that the issues regarding adults will be dealt with via the IGB, and the relevant head of service will present that to them. So to date, we've not had a policy supporting this particularly vital area of work. We recognise and value the role of carers. That is mentioned in the policy itself, and I would reiterate that today. It itself builds on what already carried out as a Western Isles carers strategy in 2022, which this builds on. The aim is to give particular guidance on the assessment process. Assessment will be in a transparent process leading to an equitable provision of service. Policy is, as I said already, relevant to both adults and children. We have made it clear how we will make decisions on whether there are issues of exceptional needs, so that's beyond the norm, and that will be we'll deal with any individuals where there is any changes in assessment due to this policy. I need to reiterate it is a small number of individuals, and we will be working very closely with them to ensure their needs continue to be met. I need to reiterate, because I know this policy has created an amount of need amongst carers groups, that there is absolutely no financial saving being taken from this. This is simply about having a clearer, more transparent assessment process. It's simply about ensuring an equity of provision thereafter. I thank Councillor MacDonald, who was making the point in relation to other areas, for emphasising that importance of continuing dialogue with carers, and certainly that is something we will commit to, is that continuing dialogue with individuals individual families and gaining their views and talking through any anxieties which continue to exist. But to emphasise again, this is not about changing funding, this is not about cuts, this is not about savings, this is improving the assessment process and improving the assessment process. I'm more than happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Gibson. You were breaking up a wee bit there, but I think we got the gist of what you said. Members have any questions on the respite care policy? I see no hands. Are you happy, therefore, to agree the recommendation 3-1?
Yes.
Oh, all right. All right. Councillor Callum McLean.
Yeah. Thanks, Chair. David, we've met over this before. We've had a quite in-depth conversation about this, but since then, there's some things have come up in it, and it's to do with the consultation process. Now, forgive me, I don't know if this relates to the children or to the adults. So if it doesn't relate to the children, then ignore it, and we can. Some of the people were saying that in the consultation, for instance, Appendix 2 was not included in the original paperwork. Is that correct?
In the very early consultations, there was reference to Appendix 2. One of the bits of feedback from the early consultations was that it would be useful to have it, so it was added as we evolved in that, in order that people had much information as we possibly could. And it was certainly included in the most recent, when we took it back to the Strategic Carers Forum.
Yeah. The other one is that sorry for taking this one, is that the eligibility criteria within the draft policy was not up for consultation.
The eligibility criteria is a national thing. It's something that was already there. It's something that's already agreed through the carers strategy. It's not something new. It was what we were doing was noting what was already practiced in this policy, rather than presenting it as a new development.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks.
Councillor Gordon Murray.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not a member of your committee. Thank you to David Gibson for the report. I don't want to keep banging on about impact assessments, but apparently doesn't the Health and Social Care have a duty to provide or have a fairer Scotland assessment to ensure that those who need care are not disadvantaged by their financial position? And I don't think that's been done yet. The other issue I had was, has there been cuts to the critical and those in the critical criteria and those who need substantial care? And that is our real concern if that's the case, because they are usually the ones that are in most financial need. There was comments on the previous item that we must take care of our vulnerable. So if we're going to be cutting this is going the other way. Thanks, Chair.
I can assure Councillor Murray there is no reduction. There is no cut. When you look here,
David, can I stop you? You're breaking up a bit there.
Okay. Thanks, Chair. I can't hear the answer. Thanks.
Yeah. Will you try again, David?
Yeah, no problem. Can you hear me this time?
Yes, that's better.
I would re-emphasise there are no cuts to overall budgets within this. If you look at that particular bit you're referring to, Councillor Murray, it does talk about indicative levels, and most importantly for us, we have put in within the policy the how we would deal with exceptional need. And that is something which doesn't exist in many authorities, but we're very, very clear within the policy. There is a way of dealing with exceptional needs. That would need to be dealt with by a directorate or head of service level. So there is a possibility to go beyond those indicative levels that we have there.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gibson. Charlie Nicholson, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, David, for the report. We do need a respite policy, and I thought it was just going to be kind of plain sailing, but since we last spoke together, there has been the respite policy concerns put in to us very recently. For example, the respite policy has no right of appeal, and that's missing from the policy and something that goes against the kind of spirit of guidance. There's no travel impact analysis been taken in regards to this as well within the service. And there's a duty placing a legal responsibility on health and social care providers to complete an impact assessment. And the Fair of Scotland assessment aspect of the impact assessment has not been undertaken. So there's quite a few questions there that have come in kind of recently to some members as such. And we've had the kind of response from quite a few individuals and quite a few groups since we last kind of spoke as such, that they would rather see this being withdrawn and come back to the meeting in February when more information, more consultation and clarification on the right of appeal and transport and other areas like that are taken on board.
I do need to come back on that. This has been extensively consulted on. We've followed all advice given in terms of consultation. We've gone above and beyond in many ways. There is what we've gathered is good practice from what is already done. So we do have a policy, and it's important, I would say, that this doesn't get sidetracked. There is absolutely no doubt that when we come to review this policy, which we have committed to doing every year, that we will do it, and we will develop, will be changes. However, in terms of the right of appeal, we've very clearly said where there is exceptional need, head of service or the direct and children's services, it will be the director of education and children's services can become involved. So I'm concerned that some of these things which haven't been mentioned throughout the consultation are coming in at this stage. We've carried out all the consultation we've been advised we are required to do.
Thank you for that, David, and it kind of ties up, unfortunately, from the individuals and groups that have come in, that the fact that some information was included in the consultation documentation but was not part of the consultation, was not made clear during the consultation. This only came to light, really, seemingly a few days ago at a carer strategy meeting with key CNES professionals regarding the respite policy. So that's quite worrying when you hear that. And
I think, Councillor Nixon, if I can suggest that you get that individual to get in touch with Mr. Gibson so that the matter can be discussed. I don't think it's a matter for this meeting, really. It sounds like it's an individual case. And that would be my advice to you, to have that individual contact Mr. Gibson and he can resolve whatever issue there is. Would you do that?
Thank you for that, Chair, but that is one individual and then there are other groups, chairs. And the groups are indicating to us, and I think a few members here, over the last kind of day, that they would wish further time to engage with Mr. Gibson and engage with the respite policy and try and get it right, because there are concerns seemingly.
Yeah, Can I just add one thing? And we've spent about a year and a half going over this policy. We spent a significant months going to consultation, and there does come a point where we need to pull that together. At the carer strategy meeting, there were other council officers there. I wasn't there. Emma McSween, head of service and adult services, was there. Graham Miller, service manager. And they haven't come back to me from that meeting with any of those concerns. These are concerns that are coming up afterwards. And Councillor Nicholson and myself have had some discussions about where this is coming from. I am absolutely committed to meeting with any family, any individual. I'll do it. Doesn't matter time of the day. I'll do it in the evening if necessary to go over their specific circumstances. We are talking about a small number of people, so it's very hard for me to make any comment on the exact points without breaching a confidentiality, which Councillor Nicholson and others know, and I do appreciate the respect to that as we go through this conversation.
I think it's absolutely essential that we agree the respite policy today and ask these individuals to contact Mr. Gibson if they've got any issues. It really isn't fair to bring matters in this way at the last minute. It's just not acceptable, really. So I think that would be the best way forward, in my view, if Councillor Nixon asked these individuals to contact Mr. Gibson and we could resolve these particular issues. Are you still in, Mr. Murray? Your hand is up.
Thank you, Chair. It was just a comment. We welcome this respite policy is to be welcomed, but we want to get it right, and we want to help Mr. Gibson so that he doesn't face problems, or families meeting him and having problems with the policy. So would it not be right just for Mr. Gibson to meet these families before we agree to iron out any differences? We still have to ratify it at full council, so could this be done before full council?
I am not happy with that idea at all. I'm very keen to have the policy agreed so that Mr. Gibson has a policy from which to work, and these individuals can take their issues to him and have them resolved. This policy applies to a great many people, not just to one or two. So I think that's the way I would like to see it happen, if you don't mind. Thank you very much. I see no more hands. Are you happy to agree the recommendation at 3-1? Thank you very much indeed. We move now then to item number 8, which is the item number 8, which is the report on the Volunteer Centre at Western Isles. And this report seeks approval for the payment of grant for 2020-2021 to Volunteer Centre Western Isles. And Fiona McInnes-Begg is here to speak to this report and to answer any questions associated with it. Fiona.
Thank you, Chair. The report sets out the relationship between the Volunteer Centre and the Corla's Community Learning and Development section in particular. It's around mutual benefit to both young people and community groups. If I could bring your attention to point 6.3, where we talk about the wider achievement agenda and how the work of both the Volunteer Centre in conjunction with Community Learning and Development helps enable young people to access the wider achievement awards. And you'll see there that 484 Callanish awards for those under 12 and 540 Youth Volunteer awards for those over 12 were presented in the last year. I think probably moving forward, it's just really to have a look at the detail in this, the service level agreement, and if people have got questions, I'm happy to take them.
Thank you very much, Fiona. Thank you. Members, do you have any questions for Fiona? I see no hands. Are you happy to agree the recommendation of 3-1? Thank you very much. We move on then to item number 9. Item number 9 is the Northern Alliance Regional Improvement Plan Phase 3. This is a report by the Director for Education, Skills and Children's Services, and it provides an update on the 2020-21 Northern Alliance Regional Improvement Plan. And Director, or is it Mr. McCann?
Thank you, Chair. The plan we report on each year. This is the third phase of our plan with the Northern Alliance. I've identified a 2.2 that out of the 6 partnerships, we are in the Northern Alliance are amalgamation of these local authorities, representing about 58% of the landmass of Scotland. The priorities are outlined in the progress on Phase 2, Early Years Emerging Literacy. I'm pleased to see in relation to all of these areas, we play a significant role here in the Western Isles, and on a number of them have very significant contribution. Our early years, we have met the national levels of delivery, and as many will know, significant physical improvement to facilities and better distribution across the Western Isles. Emerging literacy has been a significant development here, and one in which all primary schools in the Western Isles have taken on a major delivery element. Our work on IT transformation has been significant, and we lead nationally on that and across the Northern Alliance. Our work on languages, leadership, numeracy and poverty, closing the gap, etc. Again, significant work in that. In terms of numeracy and secondary maths, as Mr. MacDonald has previously outlined, we are working with lead officers of HMIE assigned to the Northern Alliance to raise our performance there. In terms of sustaining education, we have presented at the national conference, etc. on that, both in terms of our prioritisation approach to the learning estate and in terms of the Barra Hub, the new approach to development of services through hub development. So very much seen in that way. The development of those are outlined in the work streams, and the detail are provided. All of the work is, of course, underpinned with analytics that are showing or recording impact assessments as we go forward. A separate report to this was circulated by the Chief Executive based on the feedback from Scottish Government, Education Scotland, on the Northern Alliance Plan, which I hope members would recognise is very positive. I think this shows our playing our part, certainly punching at our weight or above in some areas in our partnership with these collaboratives. And on the IT side, of course, we lead on the ones nationally where all 6 collaboratives are working in support of e-learning. So although the report is for noting, I would wish that members record the impact it is having in our schools.
Members have any questions for the Director? Mr. Callum McLean.
Yes, Director, thank you for it. It's a very, very comprehensive report here as well. There is an item under equalities, and it mentions a bullet point there. An agreement has been reached between Stonewall, who can offer a reduced rate for the local authorities with the Northern Alliance to complete the benchmarking exercise. What about us as an authority? Who would we have to benchmark as a benchmarking exercise? Could we employ the Christian Institute?
We could, Northern Alliance could work to employ with any consultant, and we as an individual local authority could likewise do so.
So there is an opening there for the Christian Institute to come in and do a benchmarking exercise.
If they were invited to, yes.
And who would invite them?
That would be down to either the local authority department, if it was doing work in its own equalities, or in this case, it would be down to the Northern Alliance, and in the Northern Alliance we have a framework, governance framework, that allows all the authorities to work together on this work stream. And therefore, at the moment, I think it's commissioned work on equality such that they will report at future on how that looks. But these are the forums in which that could be raised.
Yeah, the reason I do that, Mr. Chisholm, and for the rest of us, is it's to do with the inclusive employment. And I do feel that sometimes, and particularly in our day, Christian individuals, Christian pupils or employees are become marginalized. The reason I say that, I'm going to quote this. This came from my son-in-law to me last night. Last night, my granddaughter, who is 9, got a message from a friend of hers with this question: do you support LGBTQ+? 9 years of age. She replied, "Good night, Amber, I'm not going to discuss." Then she came back with this: answer my question, Heidi. Do you support bisexual, lesbian, gay, pansexual? Now, my granddaughter, it's not in this authority, it's another authority, has always said that she loves Jesus Christ. This is what I would call, at the highest, can we say that there is something fundamentally wrong when this happens in our schools. Therefore, what I'm saying to us is when we get a benchmarking exercise, we must get a fair benchmarking exercise.
Thank you, Mr. McLean. Anybody else wish to comment?
Yeah.
Yes. That's Mr. Hugh Stewart.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon to you.
It's a wee bit dark over here. I don't know what it's like in Stornoway.
It's getting that way.
But last night we had a moonbow here, so I don't know, did you have that over in Stornoway? It was pretty spectacular at midnight. A very simple, and it's been asked in the best spirit. The director explained there about the Northern Alliance and the use of external agencies in relation to equalities legislation. As he spoke, he mentioned that the department also has benchmarking exercises. It's simply for the director to confirm that Stonewall hasn't been employed to provide equalities for Coronian and Shear's Education Department.
No. Sorry, Chair. No. And in fact, in terms of any benchmarking done here, Mr. MacDonald and our SEOs, working with our head teachers, use the Curriculum for Excellence, Experience and Outcomes, and we have not felt the need to go external under areas of equality, since our own internal evaluations are suggesting to us that we have a strong approach to this and not one requiring us to go beyond.
I would just close by saying that I am sure the churches will be very happy to provide representatives to help and assist the department if they ever wish to have assistance in regard to equalities legislation.
Thank you very much, Reverend Stewart. Thank you very much. Is anybody else?
Yes.
Okay, Ray, come.
I have my own views about the Northern Alliance, but obviously this is just the education side of it. But under some of these statistics, generally, the performances seem to be very high. I know it seems to be 17-18 or 18-19. I can't remember. I don't have it in front of me. But on the one phase 3 plan, S4 for some reason seems, from 49% up to 53, as opposed to the others, which are way up at 80 and 90%, which is terrific. Can maybe the director explain exactly why is the divergence on that particular one?
Sorry, Councillor Mackenzie, could you clarify is this something within the phase 3 you're referring to, or within the data reports coming up later? And if it's within phase 3, could you direct me to where it is?
Yeah, okay, I'll just disappear from you for a minute. It's Regional Improvement Plan Phase 3. I don't know how that obviously covers the whole of the Northern Alliance for some reason.
It does.
Yeah. So it's difficult to see what our statistics are. But that particular one seems to be particularly low, S4.
But
with the Northern Alliance, whereas others are up at 80 and 70.
Are you able to point me to which work stream you're talking about and where that comment is, so I can more fully answer you?
Yeah, it's well, you were referring to progress on the plan phase 2, and you touched on various things. Well, it's the plan immediately below.
Oh, I see. It's the indicators you're referring to.
Yeah.
Under review.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Thanks very much. Okay. If I can just mention there, and again, Mr. MacDonald may wish to come in. That's on page 7, and it's provided for ourselves. This was an attempt for the Northern Alliance to look at a baseline measure against which all of the partners in the Northern Alliance would set their targets for improvements. This was set out against the 2017-18 performance levels, so the percentages of pupils in P1, etc. Now, in some of those areas, these baselines are done on an average across the performance of all the local authorities in the Northern Alliance. And in relation to some of the data, maths, for example, is weak across Scotland in certain of the levels, although at the exit stages, we seem to do very well. So the statistics there were an attempt to get a benchmark across all of the 6 partners of the Northern Alliance, set a baseline of which we would all agree to work from, and we would be looking at the outcome of this year's data to see what improvement we made against that. Now, part of the reason that some of those data undoubtedly will be low, particularly in the determining of a level at primary, will have to do with the moderation process, which we may come back to later on when we look at the data for our own authority, and we'll work with Donald MacLeod there to give a bit more explanation. But there has been wider variation in the data in primary because we're asking teachers to estimate the performance of young people against their work in the class, and some of that has shown greater variability, although I'm pleased to say the more moderation we're doing, i.e. the more opportunity we've got for teachers across different schools and different authorities to work together, the more robust our moderation is becoming, and therefore our estimates. But that's where those differences are arising.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mackenzie. Are we now happy to agree the recommendation at 3.1? Thank you very much. Item number 10, COVID-19, Education, Skills and Children's Services Recovery Plan Update. This report provides information about the work undertaken to maintain the safe and effective operation of schools during the COVID-19 pandemic, and preparations made to ensure readiness for any future restrictions on school attendance due to the virus. And Mr. Donald MacLeod is here to speak to this report. Mr. MacLeod.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, this report that's coming before members today is effectively an update report on one that was presented at the previous series. It's a reality for all of us that we continue to operate in a climate of COVID-19, locally, nationally and internationally for that matter. And the work that was highlighted for the 22nd of September has continued to take place throughout, and the purpose of this report is to update on the progress with that. As has been highlighted at the beginning of the meeting today, the work that our schools and the CORLA has undertaken has been exemplary in the preparation and the implementation of strategies to keep our young children and staff safe, and really commend our school communities for responding so strongly to that. And also would like to acknowledge the contribution of our trade unions, who have worked very closely with us, representing staff views in making sure that our COVID-19 risk assessments are compliant and agreed universally. And I think it's a strength of that collaboration that we have seen very, very high levels of compliance across our schools in the implementation of measures to keep everyone safe, and very, very little issues really coming up. Since the last series, the report has acknowledged that we did have an outbreak of COVID-19 in the Eriskay and South Uist area particularly, and that did lead to a short period of precautionary school closure, and also a subsequent outbreak in the central Ballyvanich area, which led to a precautionary closure of one class there. I think, and the feedback that we've had from teachers, the response has been very strong from these schools, and the position that we're in to be able to respond with a very strong e-learning offer through our local and national sector leading work means that head teachers are reporting to us little or no impact to the schools being closed for these periods, with children being able to very effectively continue their learning through these short periods of closure. The report does go on to talk about the risk assessment process. That is a continuing process. A great deal of work was undertaken initially in risk assessments to get schools into a position of safe opening, but the guidelines, the national advice, circumstances continue to change on a regular basis. And as a result, that risk assessment process has continued. And many schools are now on their 8th or 9th iteration of risk assessment as they gradually evolve that process with their staff and school community. And that's something that we continue to support. It wasn't a single process. We continue to make sure that the schools are operating safely for all our staff, and as I've mentioned, they have access to all that is required of them to do that. The majority of the first term and into the beginning of the second term, the Chorley had made a commitment to focus on recovery curriculum, which was very much centred on core literacy and numeracy in Gaelic and English, and on health and well-being. And our executive heads in their work across their schools and in the quality assurance work that they're undertaking are reporting to us now a real positive impact on core learning based on that strong focus coming out of lockdown and coming back into school. And let's hope that that's something that will come through the rest of this academic year and be seen in our 2021 attainment results. And hopefully we will see that although schools did report some real challenges for families coming back in out of the lockdown period, our schools have done sterling work to support them. We also acknowledge as well the importance of our curriculum changes in addition to that we've undertaken at 7.4, which is a significant focus on interdisciplinary and applied learning and taking the learning outdoors and making it active to make sure that as much learning as possible can happen in the safest means possible. And that obviously is sometimes challenging in our climate, but schools have very capable of adapting and changing their curriculum to make that happen. We also have to acknowledge, and is included in the report here in Section 8, the work of our wider departmental services, catering and cleaning colleagues, schools IT services that have made sure that the infrastructure and the services are in place to make sure that the staff are there and present and able to deliver the services that are required of them. And finally, in terms of this, there's the continued readiness to keep responding to the needs of the dynamic situation that we're in. And we are continuing to keep communication frequently with schools and keeping our dialogue with our school teams and head teacher management teams to make sure that we're able to respond to everything that's currently happening. And very importantly, in 8.2, we continue to support and develop the National Curriculum the National Curriculum Offer. And as the Director has said, that has become the insurance policy nationally, and there is work coming from schools in the Western Isles out benefiting schools from all over Scotland. And although the report there acknowledges 5,000 children are now accessing the East Coast Study Support Programme, since writing that's increased by another 2,000, and it was reported this week there are now 7,000 enrolments in that programme. It's a massive impact on the work of the Western Isles. Also, since this report was published, the most significant things that schools have been working on at the moment is making sure that they have completed their ventilation and temperature management plans.
Donald, we've lost you. Could you sit a bit nearer to the microphone, please?
Okay, is that better now?
Much better, much better.
Could I just check how far you heard up to?
You were just covering the last couple of items, the items beyond the report.
Okay, I'll just read it. The main piece of work that we've been doing since the report was completed was to undertake the ventilation and temperature plans for schools to make sure that they are able to maintain good ventilation, which is a requirement of COVID-19 mitigation, and also trying to balance that against maintaining heating levels in school that are appropriate for young people. So each school has had support from education and technical services colleagues to make sure that that is in place. And we continue to work with them to make adjustments where that is required to keep classes within the required temperatures. And in addition to that, we are providing, and will be in the coming weeks, providing additional support to families where there might be a need for some additional clothing, because we do recognise that and have explained and have support of school communities that the reality is classrooms will be colder this winter than they normally would be. They are warmer than is the requirement, the minimum requirement, but they are colder than what people would typically be used to in a school classroom in December, January. And we continue to work with schools to make sure that they have all that they need to do that. I'd be happy to take any questions from members in any aspect of the report, and apologies for the breakup of sound.
Not at all, not at all. Thank you very much for your very full report indeed. Yes. Members, do you have any questions for Mr. MacLeod? Mr. Paul Steele.
Thank you, Chair. Just in relation to the outbreak that we had in Eriskay and South Uist, and the response from the staff in the school was fantastic. I've experienced it firsthand, and the work being carried out by the young people through eSchool was really useful, and VCN as well. My question relates to the exam diet coming up this year. Last year obviously things didn't go as planned due to COVID. I'm just wondering what the plans are for this year.
I'd be happy to answer that. Yes, at the moment, the government and SQA have confirmed that National 5 examinations will not proceed, and that awards will be made via an alternative accreditation route, which is based on internal assessments in schools. That will involve a provisional award being made, subsequently verified by SQA. As it currently stands today, we understand that hires and advanced hires are expected to go ahead, but on a varied timescale, with the exam window being a little later in the year. We don't know as yet if any changes will come to that, but we are working with our schools, and in fact we met with our secondary head teacher group today to look at both the matter of quality assurance and moderation of our National 5 awards, but also to make some contingency potential readiness for a circumstance if the government or SQA should make a decision to withdraw the examinations for higher and advanced higher as well. But as it stands at the moment, National 5 will be internally assessed, and higher and advanced higher will be through examination in a slightly later window than usual.
And we could possibly add to that our internal assessment has been very robust, and when it was suddenly sprung upon us last time round, fortunately all of the necessary evidence was ready and available to be used in our pupils' favour. Councillor Roddy Mackay-Uist.
Thanks, Chair. I'd just like to reiterate what Councillor Steele has said there. The response from the school staff when we had the outbreak in Ballavanik in particular was excellent. They kept us well informed, they kept the parents well informed, and it was really appreciated by both ourselves and the community. So they have to be commended on that.
Thank you very much, Councillor Mackay. Anybody else? Are you happy then to agree the recommendation of 3-1? Thank you very much. We move now to item number 11, which is the Education Performance Update, and this report provides an update on the latest available performance information and data available on the quality and standards of education in the Western Isles, and Mr. Donald MacLeod will speak to this report.
Thank you again, Chair. I'll try and make sure I keep the sound flowing through the whole of this presentation this time.
I wasn't criticizing you.
That's okay, absolutely fine. We would typically be taking reports to committee at this time of year, providing a significant amount of qualitative and quantitative data about our performance. But obviously the circumstances of 2020 has made that very different for us this year. So we have provided what we have available to us and the data that we do have in terms of data at the moment, which is set out in the report. We have previously taken to the last series the information in terms of the SQA awards from the summer of 2020. So that's not included here. Typically we would have had a release on the National Insight Benchmarking Tool, which is a platform that collates all exam results, qualification results, and gives us data about how performance has matched against virtual comparators, Northern Alliance and national data. However, that's not yet been released. It's typically released in the September of each year, but with the disruption to the exam season in 2020, that data has not yet been released. So we don't have that available to us yet. But what we have provided here is information that is present and available for us. And it does focus more on the qualitative than the quantitative. In 4.1, I've described the information that we do have available. The SQA national qualifications data, which was presented already to the September series of meetings. We have 2019 leaver destination information from Insight, which is an element of it that has been released because it's based on the 2019 leaver cohort. And that's the 2019 S5, which also includes those who stay on in school, which is different to the SDS measure. We also have a Scottish Government equity audit that was undertaken, which I'll touch on further on, and Scottish Attainment Challenge Impact Report and attendance data. What we would typically share with you that we don't have this year is the full Insight benchmarking information, any HMI inspections that would have been undertaken. That continues to be paused and is at the moment likely to be paused for the remainder of the 2021 academic year, although that could change depending on COVID status. And similarly, care inspected inspections, although we may see some return of care inspected inspections earlier than those of HMIE. And also because Curriculum for Excellence data, which Councillor Mackenzie was referencing earlier, was not collected locally or nationally because it fell within the lockdown period. We don't have that information available either this year. So there will be a gap in the data over time there for us. But that's a situation that every authority and nationally is facing. In terms of the Insight measure that is available to us, we have the initial positive destination measure, which is a measure of the 2019 S5 cohort. And I would draw members' attention to 5.4, which is the graph showing that data, and the associated table, which shows a continued and sustained positive outcome for young people in the Western Isles with very, very high initial positive destination rates that compare very favourably with our national and local comparators and are sustained over the 5-year period of the data. Onwards as well to 5.6, which provides a breakdown of what these initial destinations are. And for that S5 cohort of 2019, there are a few significant things that this table demonstrates and echoes some of what's already been discussed at committee today in terms of the Corners vision and the work that's been undertaken. And this is an evidence of the impact of that work. And I would first of all highlight the difference in the rate of employment for our S5 cohort of 2019, which is significantly above that seen in both virtual and national comparators, and how that compares then to the further education figure. And whilst we value, of course, further and higher education, and it still has it's a very important place as part of the pathway for our young people, this also recognises that a significant investment in modern foundation and modern apprenticeships and pathways into employment and local on-island employment is really starting to come through. But also equally importantly, we do maintain and continue to maintain a higher than average rate of onwards pathways through into higher education. It may seem lower there at 4.9%, but that is the S5 cohort, and the majority of our young people go off to higher education after S6. Another important one is the staying on rate in school, and whilst that is lower than in other areas, that is indicative again of an indicator, should I say, of where our young people are choosing to not just stay on in school for the sake of it, but to find pathways that are meaningful for them to get to a good positive destination earlier in their education journey than maybe happen in other areas. So overall, this presents a very strong picture of the impact of the work of the Comhairle. Also in section 6 of the report, we have information on initial findings of a Scottish Government equity audit that was conducted in all 32 authorities through September and October. It was actually in October, November. And this was a process that was undertaken by Scottish Government to evaluate the impact of equity of provision for all pupils during the lockdown and coming out of lockdown. And the officer from Education Scotland that conducted that was very impressed with the work that was undertaken through the Western Isles. Again, it reiterates the very important work that was undertaken to make sure that everything was taken account of during the lockdown, and we made sure that we had provision for as many, or in most cases all of our pupils as we could, and also the support that's been provided on the return to school. And the role of executive heads in meeting with that officer and being able to give a strong account of the work that they undertake across the schools is a very important feedback from that exercise. Onwards onto section 7, there's information on the Scottish Attainment Challenge Impact Report. The Scottish Attainment Challenge has been around for a number of years and has mainly been focused on identified authorities in the central belt of Scotland. But there are 2 universal funds within that fund, which our members may be aware of, has come to committee previously, and also a fund for the care experienced children and young people to support improvement in attainment for children and young people who have experienced care. Within these 2 areas, there's information about positive impacts that the Comhairle is able to achieve the administration of these grants. And finally, I would highlight within the attendance data that's been provided here that for the period August to 31st October, which is effectively the whole of term 1 and the beginning part of term 2, for Western Isles remains exactly comparable, well, within fractions to what it was in the same period in 2019. And whilst there are small local variations based on things like the COVID outbreak in South Uist and Eriskay, generally speaking, our attendance has remained very strong and has not shown any impact of the global pandemic. And our schools have been strongly supported by the parents of the children and have participate in their learning. So I'll be happy to take any questions from members on the report.
Thank you. Ask the director to. I would just want to reinforce the point made there in 5.6. The critical nature of COVID, of course, and the challenge we set ourselves in the council here over recent years, supported by the Comhairle's policy, was to make sure we had parity of esteem with applied learning options, and that through personalisation and choice in the senior phase and harmonised timetable, we gave access to the apprenticeship family. That is showing the real benefits when you look at what a initial and sustained destination is, positive and sustained. That means that it's tested not only at the point they enter the destination post-school, but up to a year or more afterwards. What we are seeing here is a significant number of young people going into employment locally and nationally, but not giving up on education. They are actually undertaking their further education as a part of employment up to graduate level. Therefore, they are being paid while they learn, which has an important impact on poverty and is in fact an added value to parents who, for the Western Isles, typically funding a young person in education further or higher off island has an average cost of approximately 10 to 12,000. So you can still see our strong performance into higher education and the fact that our young people are making really positive choices. Now, we follow each and every individual. So I know members have previously talked here about the importance that I should pay to the individual. And I take pride in doing that. And this year shows that in the Western Isles, we do not know the location of every young person leaving school. And this data shows that we track them under Opportunities for All and DYW. We have positive plans in place, and we maintain that post-school, including for those with additional support needs. So we are confident that this year, after the first year of COVID, we will be positively reporting similar statistics for next year. And so the last point I want to make on this, because it is often raised with us, of course there is a consequence of this data for the COLA. In other words, applied learning accumulates fewer tariff points, even although they have higher levels of attainment. So for example, foundation engineering has higher demands than higher maths and physics, but it has fewer tariff points. So we see that impact on our schools. However, the data here shows that on exit from education in the Western Isles, there is a strong performance. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Director. Convener. Thank you, Chair, and again, thanks to Donald for the report. And I do think, as the Director has just said, the positive destinations from 2014 right through till 2018-19, it indicates a very strong record for children throughout the Western Isles. And even if we look at the impact of COVID, even then, it shows that schools are still performing well, even with a significant break in their education over spring and summer months. So I think we should commend not just the department, but the teachers and the parents who've supported children through what was a very difficult process. And I think that's what we should be applauding right now in terms of our children and young people, that they have responded very well to the pandemic that we're still going through, and there is optimism that sometime within the next year maybe we will be free of that. But it is important that we continue to support our schools and the parents and the children in terms of their education, and hopefully more and more of them will see that positive destination as being employment within the islands. And that is not to diminish in any way those who may go to higher and further education and do well there. So I think we can be proud of our young people in particular.
Thank you very much, Convener. Councillor Gordon Murray.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not a member of your committee. I just wanted to reiterate what the convener was saying, and also when I was reading this report, I have to say I was delighted, absolutely delighted to read on 7.3 that under the People Equity Fund that there had been a 15% closure in the poverty-related attainment gap, and that's brilliant. I'm so delighted to see that, and I want to say well done and congratulations to Donald and Director and Director-elect, if I can call him that, and the rest of the teachers and the staff for doing that. And I don't know, I'm not a member of your committee, Chair, but I don't know if it's worth getting a report back to highlight the best practices that has contributed to this 50%, and maybe use it to steer future policy.
The Director.
Thanks very much, Councillor Murray and Convener. Just to say at Christmas this year, and appreciate it was ahead of the COVID, but it laid the foundation for this to work. Colleagues of all our head teachers at our conference, working with colleagues of Education Scotland and local leadership, identified 11 areas that of good practice, and some of which were nationally sector leading, that laid the foundation of this work. So we are more than happy to bring back that. We're preparing, or our plan was to prepare a report on that basis to share more widely with the committee what lays the foundation for these exit exams, given that so much is often made, particularly in some aspects of the press about the 5 standard higher, etc., dumbing down of education. That is not the reality of the experience of the Western Isles, so happy to bring back such a report.
Thank you very much indeed. And I think we could also, Mr. MacLeod, alert the Council to the fact that the poverty report is to be finalised fairly soon. We'll be brought to a future meeting.
Absolutely, Chair. Yes, we're working. We have the shared responsibility of that with NHS Western Isles, and we have some meetings coming up through December, which will work towards finalising the update to the Western Isles Child Poverty Report, and that will come back to committee in early 2021. I would also mention as well that in terms of what Councillor Murray has highlighted there, that is a very positive impact on that team, and we would like to have maybe been able to see some further closing of that gap, but that links back to my earlier comment about that data not having been gathered or been able to be gathered during the lockdown. We will and expect at the moment to be able to gather that performance attainment data again in May 2021, and that will give us a further benchmark of hopefully positive steps to close the poverty-related attainment gap.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. MacLeod. There are no further hands. Can I ask you to agree the recommendation of 3.1? Thank you very much indeed. We're now on to item 12, Children and Young People's Strategic Data Set. This report provides an update on the Children and Young People's Strategic Data Set 2020, and the Director will speak to this report.
Thank you very much, Chair. Members will remember from our last comprehensive Education and Children's Services self-evaluation report, one of the recommendations of the independent consultants who comprised lead officers from previous post holders within Education Scotland and the Children's Social Work Services, very prominent leaders in that area, that they were keen that we had a benchmark set of statistics against which we could use our self-evaluation to establish a business plan, and critically that we would be in a position to provide for ourselves in setting our targets and for members to look at the overall context of the Western Isles, a strategic data set covering education and children's services that was benchmarked against the 32 local authorities, in many cases nationally, against the local government benchmarking group for of authorities that we're included with, and members should know that we're included with the 7 most depressed local authorities in Scotland, and to see our performance in that is gratifying, since it's usually very high. So this gives you an opportunity to see our performance at a point in time which we update regularly and review at Directorate, that informs the business plans we set and informs the targets we set with our head teachers for our direction for travel, and in fact is reflected in the mission statement and the priorities that we publicise for the authority. I would be keen to draw members' attention to page 5, as you will know that the government set a national performance framework within which all education and children's services, in fact all services in Scotland, would be measured over the period of the government. And our data to date, including that which we've just presented, shows that our national outcomes for people in the Western Isles, that they grow loved, safe and respected, is an improving trend. Living in communities that are inclusive, empowered, again, our work on community conversations, empowerment, I think, take us strongly in that direction. Creating diverse cultures are expressed and widely. I've mentioned before, we have 19 languages spoken in our schools. We are a very inclusive community and a very tolerant. We have a globally competitive entrepreneurial approach, and our data on post-school destinations reflect that, as does the work with economic development and others, and the number of small businesses taking place here, and the number of young people now being our education skill able to contribute again if you look at the curriculum for excellence. So looking at each of these areas and then looking at the data, areas where we want to grow, we tend to be in general over time doing better, and areas we'd like to reduce negative impacts, we tend to be over time managing that. So I think overall we are doing reasonably well, but I thought it was important that members could see, and we will regularly report this to you on an annual basis. But I'm happy to get any questions. And I should mention that our officer Neil MacLeod, who does our performance management work in the department, working with Donald and other officers in children's services, maintains this comprehensive database.
Thank you. Neil, would you like to add anything at this point?
Nothing to add, Chair. As the Director has said, it's a data set that we use not just for benchmarking, but also to look at the trends in our performance over time, and all feeds into our business planning process. And as members have heard already today, we use this data in quite a number of reports, not just internally, but externally. So something that we're trying to expand as well, to look at the wider aspects of children and young people, and not just specifically on their attainment or the work that they do in school. So, but again, happy to answer any questions any members may have.
Thank you very much, Mr. MacLeod. Councillor Gordon Murray.
Thank you, Chair. On reading this report, I noticed that reading and writing in primaries was below the Scottish average, but it improved in the secondaries. But numeracy was all below the Scottish average in primary and secondary education, with a concern with the problem solving. I wonder if it's worth maybe revisiting the numeracy and literacy policy that was done by the CORLA last term, because this is quite a worry, to be honest. And I think maybe it's the concern over problem solving. You yourself, as a maths teacher, knows how important problem solving is in terms of numeracy. So I wonder whether revisiting that policy would be a worthwhile exercise for your committee, Chair.
Director.
Thanks very much, Councillor Murray. I'm pleased to report, and Mr. MacDonald and the team will come back to the committee with this. As I said before, the data on reading, writing, and as you correctly observed, we tend to see that improve over secondary, and that tends to be where we're going into the national exams. And back to this idea, do we measure progress of children based on their exit from education or exams? And I would argue it's the exit, and the evidence is good. Maths has been a problem across the nation, I have to say, and you're right to identify the idea that it's in the applied setting. And that's one of the reasons I think that there is a perverse incentive to the tariff point scoring. If you look at the foundation apprentice or engineering and physics, it's all about the applied practical maths of that, and it operates at a level equal to or higher than maths or physics, and yet it has fewer tariff points. So we have engaged with our attainment advisor in maths. We have engaged within the Northern Alliance Plan for Maths, and so our approach to math is based on realising an attainment improvement in this area, and the members of the department will bring back to a future meeting the progress of that work and the evidence in it, and I hope be able to bring back where we identify the weakness based on error analysis, because I think one of the critical points about maths is that we focus where we know the data shows us that young people are making the mistakes, and not fall into the trap, as I've seen happen, where we continue to reinforce work that children and young people have obviously achieved. So happy to bring that report to a future meeting, and Mr. MacDonald will note that.
Thanks, Director. I really appreciate that. I'd be very interested to see that. Thank you.
Does anybody else wish to raise any points? I see no hands. Are you happy to agree the recommendation at 3-1? Thank you very much indeed. Move now then to item 13, which is support for local sports councils. This report seeks the approval for continued financial support for the 2 local sports councils, and Mr. Ian G. Campbell is available to speak to this report. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, as was said, this is the annual request from sports councils. There are 2 sports councils for additional funding. There's been reduced spending through COVID for obvious reasons, although pre-COVID there was, again, very, very high demand, and that demand is starting to come back now with extra demands for support coming out of COVID and the issues around that. We're also anticipating increased costs when things get back to a bit more normality with travel and accommodation with continued restrictions over COVID. So we're looking forward to supporting them further. My members of my team are heavily involved with the sports councils and providing advice and secretarial support. The 2 sports councils, I'd like to say, that are very highly regarded nationally. They're very successful in the work that they do and support that they provide. And this year, just recently, the Lewis and Harris Sports Council was recognised as Sports Council of the Year by Scottish Club Sport, which is the Association for Club Sport and Sports Councils. So I'm happy to take any questions on this one.
Thanks very much, Mr. Campbell. Are there any questions from members? Councillor Paul Steele.
Thank you, Chair. I don't know if I need to declare an interest as a member of the Sports Council, but
not at all.
To make. Thanks. I mean, the work that's been done in the Sports Council is really good. I don't know, if we've ever had as many young people going away to compete and train like at national levels as we do at the moment, or have done in the last couple of years. So the work that's been done by the Sports Councils to help them get there is really, really important and appreciated by the community. So I just wanted to say thanks to both Sports Councils.
Thank you, Councillor Steele. Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you, Chair. I welcome this report by Mr. Campbell before us, Gigi, and actually back up the point about what Councillor Steele has indicated there, the work that's ongoing, the different groups that are happening, and also, Chair, our sports and health staff, the work that they're doing behind the scenes under the leadership of Mr. Campbell throughout the islands, and that is amazing, and the coaching and the development and the encouraging of parents and young people getting involved in Health for All. And as Mr. Campbell indicated, this year has identified the Lewis and Harris Sports Council as one of the best in Scotland, along with our Uist and Barra folk. So all in all, a fantastic work over this year, this period, very hard and challenging on that. And I look forward to receiving a report soon, I hope, of the group that we set up to look at taking sport and that forward. I don't think it's met because of other pressures, but I look forward to that group of members and officers taking the work that's ongoing in these islands, which is phenomenal.
Councillor Norman MacDonald.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'm on 2% battery, so I don't even know if I'll be able to finish this sentence. Yeah, I'd be remiss of me not to add my plaudits to what's been said before by Councillor Nicholson and Councillor Steele. I work as Gigi's left-hand man every 2 years at the Island Games, dutifully following in his footsteps wherever he goes, and he does a power of work in between times, not just with the Island Games, but I know with the sports councils who massively support the work that the Island Games do. And it's great to see so many of our youngsters achieving higher national level participation and being able to go to the mainland now and participate with huge confidence. And it's seen across many sports, and it's the increased participation across the board, even if people don't get to reach the higher levels. We've got so many folk now participating in sport, and that's been recognised nationally. It's not all about the high achievers, it's about participation. And I think the work that Gigi and his team have done is to be commended, and it shows amongst all our youngsters. They get the opportunity at every level to participate in a huge variety of sports. And this wouldn't be possible without the work of his team and with the local sports councils, coaches, unpaid trainers, fathers, mothers, etc., driving people backwards and forwards. So we have a culture of sports which is only a good thing in the islands, and it'll be of special benefit going forward for everybody, not just mental health, physical health, well-being, and people who see the success that our island athletes achieve. They too glean something from that as well, and it's fantastic. From the Bud to Barra now, we've got fantastic young athletes participating, and I just add my own plaudits to the words already been said.
Councillor Roddy Mackay.
I'd also like to add my own plaudits to the sports councils. What they're actually doing, the work they're doing on the ground is fantastic, and it has to really be supported. The difference it makes to children is unbelievable. The children and young people that we have, I've seen it myself on a personal level. It's not just local competitions, it's not just national competitions, it's also international competitions now that the kids are taking part in, and not just taking part but actually winning. So it's a fantastic thing that the sports councils are doing, and to my mind we should be supporting them as much as possible.
Thank you very much. Director.
Can I thank all the members who've made these observations, and as we brought progress previously in language and culture, we've enjoyed the same comments, and as we've had today at a number of reports, we see that across education. You will note that in all of these things, whether it's volunteering, whether it's sports culture or other, none of the budget cuts or budget redesigns affect us taking funding or taking away services. But I do want to draw to members' attention that we require the support of members in that approach. Otherwise, if we're not to make these service redesigns, then it is these grants that are not statutory services that we will be forced to go towards. So I have to say, I want to record to all the officers, Tony Wade, Gigi, Evelyn Cool, Willie, Donald, Mary Claire and others, who are delivering services with fewer resources, less money and better outcomes, consistently with data that shows performance over time. But if we're going to protect that position, then there are those challenging decisions going forward. But a huge thanks to everyone for the support there and directly supporting our young people.
Thank you, Director. There are no further hands, so could I just add, Ian, my own thanks to you and your team and all those who work with you to look after our young people in regard to sports. It's a wonderful thing that you do. So thank you very much indeed. Are you now happy to agree the recommendation at 3-1? No hands. Thank you very much. We move on now to item 14. Item 14 is the Sports Development Team Annual Report, and this report provides information of the work of the Sports Development Service over the period August 2019 to August 2020. And again, Mr. Ian G. Campbell is here to speak to this report. Mr. Campbell.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the kind words from the last report from everybody. It's much appreciated, and I'll make sure that's passed on to the team. This is, we would normally provide you with a newsletter at this time of year, an annual newsletter detailing, giving you some detail about what we do, what we've done in the last year and across the Western Isles, and helping people get active. Primarily our young people, but not exclusively by any means. We've changed the format this year and wanted to provide you with a report to go along with it. So we've got a sort of a more corporate type of report for you, but there is a link within the report that takes you to the our standard newsletter, which gives you the nice happy looking faces running around pitches and fields and hills and all the rest of it. So, this one gives you a wee bit of wider picture about how we fit in with Sports Scotland, their corporate plan, a more active Scotland, with the emphasis just beyond sport, with health, education, environment, transport, and underpinned by inclusion. It also highlights, our links to community planning, partnership through the Quality of Life LOIP and the Active Hebrides strategy that we provide a lot of data for. So I hope you appreciate this report, and there's a lot of good information in there, and happy to answer any questions now or in the future.
Thank you very much, Mr. Campbell. Do members have any questions on this report? I see no hands. You happy to agree the recommendations that we note this report? Thank you very much indeed. We're now on to performance monitoring. There are 4 reports here. All will be coming to next 2 or 3 meetings. You happy to agree that? Thank you very much indeed. We now have an urgent item. Again, it's sports related. I hope you've all had an opportunity to have a look at it. But I know that Mr. Wade, who's going to speak to this report, will explain it all to you. It's an urgent report, provides an update on the impact of COVID-19 on sports facilities, and request approval of flexibility to sport and health fees and charges. And I'll ask Mr. Wade to speak to the report.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you for allowing us to present the report at such a late stage. But obviously, as has been mentioned, this is quite a dynamic situation that we're all working in just now. In June, we had a temporary pricing policy approved as we came out of lockdown. And as part of that report, we asked if we could review after a period of time after we reopened. So this is the purpose of this report now, that we've got a little bit of user data heading towards the winter period. We're very conscious that physical and mental health is an essential part of our well-being as a community. And over the next 2 to 3 months, this is a very uncertain period of time. So what we're requesting here is that the chair, the vice chair and senior officers have delegated powers effectively to adjust our pricing structure to reflect the circumstances as we see them. So at lockdown, we suspended the Slanjavar scheme, which has had a significant effect on our income. So what we're proposing at this stage is a limited reintroduction of that option for customers to try and encourage people to be more active over the winter period. So a reduced price to encourage more physical activity. So that's the basis of the report, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Wade. Do members have any questions? Are you happy to agree the recommendation of 3.1? Thank you very much indeed. Now, before we move to the final private item, I have something to say myself. I know that it may have come as a bit of a surprise to you when the director announced that he was retiring. It, however, was not a surprise to me, because we had discussed this matter many times over the years. And when it was first discussed, I said at that time, when you go director, I am going too. So this is going to be my final meeting of the Education Committee as chair. And I want to thank the staff. I'm hoping that they're all still here, because both the director and the staff have been extraordinarily supportive towards me and very helpful, and I've really very much enjoyed being the chair of this committee. It has had its testing moments, of course, but nonetheless, the reports before this particular committee itself are just absolutely amazing, what we are achieving as an education service here in the Outer Hebrides, and I'm very pleased to have been associated with it. I want to thank the staff very much for all of the hard work they do on our behalf and for the way in which you have supported me. So thank you very much indeed. The next scheduled meeting of this council will be on Tuesday, the 26th of January 2021, and we now go to the private items. So we stop recording.
There we go.